Sturgeon are actually one of the more fascinating fish that we have anywhere, and we have them right here in Idaho. It's a pretty neat deal. They're kind of a living fossil. I found evidence of sturgeon pretty much unchanged 250, 300 million years ago. And so they've been a pretty successful fish, and they've been around a long time, and I feel pretty fortunate that we still have them here in the canyon. Really unique thing about sturgeon is that they're really long-lived and they can grow to very large sizes. The white sturgeon, what we have here in Idaho, is actually the largest freshwater fish in North America. And it's really the largest, it's the second largest freshwater fish on the planet. Only the beluga sturgeon that folks have over in Russia actually grow bigger. But other than that, white sturgeon are about it. And historically, they would grow to be up to about 15 feet long in the Snake River and Columbia River system. We don't have too many of those big fish left. There are a few fish running around that are still about 11 to 12 feet that are in the canyon here, even though there's a pretty small number of them. But they're quite a unique fish. Because they grow and live so long, they take a long time to mature. A female won't mature until she's about 15 or 20 years old. Males mature when they're about 5 to 10 years old. And the really big fish are females. Another interesting thing about sturgeon is they don't spawn every year. The females will hold eggs for quite a few years until spawning conditions get just right before they go and lay their eggs. So a lot of times you'll catch a fish that looks like it's big gravid, big barrel-chested fish, and they'll hold onto those eggs for several years until something's just right, whether it's water temperature and flow combination. It's kind of what we think triggers them to spawn, and then they'll go into some really fast water and they'll lay their eggs. Their eggs are, if anybody's eaten caviar, they're really small and they're black and they're adhesive, and they'll broadcast them out. The males will come fertilize them, and the eggs will find a spot out there on the bottom of the river, hopefully in really fast water. Generally what they find is that, because there's a lot of predators in the river here, from everything from sculpins to salamanders to just about any suckers, just about any other fish out here love to eat sturgeon eggs. So the ones that really survive are the ones that are in that really fast water that find a little spot where predators can't get to it. And I think it's one of the reasons that really high water triggers them to spawn. So, but anyway, and the eggs will hatch into little larval sturgeon, and they grow pretty quickly until they get to be about 3 or 4 feet. They'll just take several years, 5 or 6 years for them to grow about 3 or 4 feet. Then they really slow down, growth-wise. But yeah, certainly a fascinating fish. They're a great game fish, and as more and more folks find out, we're getting more and more folks getting interested in sturgeon fishing every year. So it's pretty incredible to come out here and think of being able to catch an 8-foot fish. So hopefully we'll be able to see one of those today. An 8 or 9 foot sturgeon will be certainly over 50 years old, and maybe up to 70 years old. And so we've been managing sturgeon populations as a strict catch and release fishery here in Idaho since 1970. It wouldn't take very long if folks were keeping sturgeon out of here to pretty much do away with them. Okay, well, there gets to be more and more folks fishing for these things every year, because it's a pretty neat thing to do. And once folks come out here and try it and you catch a fish, it's kind of a hard thing not to come sturgeon fishing after you've done it. So it gets more important every year with more and more folks fishing that you kind of remember to do a few things to lessen your impact on the sturgeon population. And so we're asking folks to do a few things. One of the things that we're really asking folks to do now is to start looking into using a circle hook. Now, circle hook is it's a hook that's bent into the shape of a circle. The definition of a circle hook generally is that the point is perpendicular to the shank, and they offer a huge advantage over the regular J-style hooks in that a fish can swallow the bait with a circle hook, but it won't get hooked until the hook passes out the lips. And so the upshot of that is when you fish with a circle hook, you almost never hook a fish deeply with it. And that's one of the big threats to this population, is when a fish might swallow a hook and get hooked down in the esophagus or in the stomach or even in the gill arch, which can be a fatal wound. And so a circle hook has a huge advantage over that, because it is incredibly rare when using a circle hook to hook a fish deep. You almost always get them right in the lip area. So that's one of the number one thing. We're also asking folks to be real, when you rig up, use a lighter test line from your main line to your sinker, because it's, you know, anybody who's fished out here on the Snake River knows it's a pretty snaggy world, and if you use a lighter test line to your sinker, you won't be breaking off and leaving baited hooks down on the bottom of the river. Another thing that we're asking folks to do is using a sliding sinker rig, which allows you that if you do snag your hook up and you break off, that sinker is not going to be attached to it, because your line will slide out from that sliding sinker rig. So those are pretty simple things to do, but they're pretty important as we get more and more folks out here fishing, where you know, our main focus is trying to stop these adult fish from accumulating fishing tackle in their digestive systems. That's one of the biggest threats to the long-term health of this population. We've had, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've actually done necropsies on 4 or 5 adult sturgeon, and in almost every case there is a hook that fish has ingested, and it's punctured either the intestine or the stomach, and most likely caused the fatal wound on those fish. And so we're just asking folks to be really aware of what you're doing when you're out here, and to try to have a smallest impact on the population when you're out here enjoying these fishery as you can. One other thing that's really important, in fact we think it's so important that we actually made a regulation, is that all sturgeon fishing has to be done with barbless hooks. And anybody who's caught a sturgeon knows that their mouths are very, very fleshy, unlike a lot of other fish who have really bony mouths, where barbs don't really do much physiological damage. But sturgeon have a very fleshy mouth, and so we've made the regulation. It's been around for about 10 years now, to anytime you are sturgeon fishing, to be sure to take a pair of pliers or a file and bend your barbs down, or better yet, buy hooks, and they make them now that actually don't have barbs on them. But that's one of the most important things. One thing I've seen since I've been sturgeon fishing for about 20 years, since our barbless hook regulation has gone into effect, I'm seeing almost no incidences of really nasty hook wounds that we saw before the barbless hook reg. And I'm just, you know, I'm really happy that we get really good compliance on the barbless hook regulation, which proves what I always thought, that sturgeon fishermen really care about their fish. And you know, anybody who's come out here and caught a sturgeon, it's a pretty magical experience, and folks pretty unanimously are wanting to take care of these fish. Well, one thing about sturgeon in general is that they, as I mentioned, they are a really slow-growing fish. They're a very non-productive population. Even though the population of sturgeon in Hell's Canyon we feel is increasing now, but they increase at a really slow rate. And so each individual fish is very important to this population, especially once you've invested 60 to 70 or 80 years growing that fish to be 8-9 foot long. On top, you know, just from a pure biological standpoint, that fish is incredibly important to the population. And remember, as I mentioned, there's no, those are all big females, the really big fish. And so that makes it doubly important to make sure that we're protecting those fish. Secondly, they have tremendous value as a sport fisher, each individual fish does. And so that's just another reason for folks to, you know, when you do catch a big fish, to just remember how much fun you had with it, and treating it right and giving it maximum chance of survival for the next person, or maybe you'll have a good chance to come back and catch it again. So that's one of the reasons. It's a little different than a lot of fish populations. Sturgeon they're really unique, they're really long-lived, and they grow really slow. And plus the fact that you know, the number of anglers that want to catch a sturgeon is growing much faster than the number of big sturgeon are. So it gets to be much more critical to make sure that you're doing things right when you're out here fishing, and really reducing your impact when you come out.
Do you have an idea how many times these fish have been caught? I know you've pit tagged a lot of them and keep track.
Yeah.
How many times you've caught them that you've been able to?
Well, now sturgeon in, like I say, there's nothing global that you can say about sturgeon, because from our mark recapture studies we've done, some individuals will spend a lot of time, for years in one location, and some of them get wanderlust, and some of them will take off, and you'll see them 100 miles from where you tagged them just shortly thereafter. So it's awful hard to make any generalized statements. However, there are some real popular sturgeon holes, and I know that's true in southern Idaho more so than it is here in Hell's Canyon. But There are some individual fish that get caught probably 6 or 7 times a year, and then I'm sure there's a lot of fish in the canyon here that live in places where nobody fishes that don't get caught at all. So it's kind of a hard thing to kind of judge, but definitely there's some some regular fish. I know some of the outfitters up here can recognize some of the fish that they catch just by some of the marks that are on them, and they get pretty good at knowing when those fish are going to bite. So when we were doing our mark recapture studies, we were recapturing anywhere from 20 to 25% of the fish that we had tagged. So that means there's still a pretty good number of fish out here that don't have marks on them. And the nice thing about Hell's Canyon is that it's big enough, and the water is complex enough. There's still a lot of fish in here that don't get caught. Okay, this is our typical low impact sturgeon fishing rig here. We've got this line goes to the rod. It's 50-pound mono. This is what I consider the minimum line to use for sturgeon fishing. Now mono has a big advantage over that the new super braided line, is that it's got real thick diameter, which is really good for if you hook a big fish and he rolls up in the line. This line will not cut into him the way that the smaller diameter super braid lines will cut into the fish. So 50-pound mono is 50 or 60-pound mono is a really nice choice to use for sturgeon. If you're going to use the super braids, we're asking folks to use the really big stuff, the 130-pound super braid line, because it fishes real similar to this 50-pound mono. Mono has another big advantage, is that it doesn't. You can beat it up pretty good, and it still holds its line strength really well. So we think that's pretty important, because you get that super braid line and you nick it on a rock, and there's a lot of rocks out here. It can lose its strength really fast. So anyway, mono works really well. It stretches. Stretches is a really good thing too when you're fighting a big fish out here. It gives you lots of shock absorption. Here's our sliding sinker rig here. This is just a typical old sinker slider. Now you can get any kind of swivel will do. A lot of folks will just get a big old snap swivel and put a bead on the other end. But these are specifically made to slide up and down your line. And so what'll happen is if you snag up and you break your line off, if your hook snags up and you have to end up leaving a hook snagged, and you break this thing off, this sinker will slide off your line, and you won't leave a baited hook snagged to the bottom of the river, which is a sturgeon death trap. And that's an important thing, and why we really like sliders. This is a typical 10-ounce bank sinker, and I've got it attached to my main line. This is 30-pound line. Any 20 or 30-pound mono is really good for doing this. And that way, if you do snag up just your sinker and you hook a fish, or even if you don't hook a fish, this will break off, and you'll leave your weight only down there, and you won't leave a baited hook down. And this is typical mono leader. Now I'm using an 80-pound test shock leader, because this is kind of what takes all the abuse when you're fighting a fish. And then the good old circle hook. And like I say, these circle hooks I think are one of the really important factors in low impact sturgeon fishing. We're just sticking it on the old circle hook like that, little piece of steel head. And you'll see this is a non-offset circle hook, so that means that the point is in line with the shank. An offset would be this thing would be bent over a little bit. And then there's the circle hook with the point perpendicular this way to the shank. That's what makes it a circle hook. Well, actually, it's a catfish. But it's a good. This is a good example. I want to show you how good a circle hook works. And you can see how I didn't have to work at all to hook that fish. It hooked itself just perfectly right in the corner of the mouth. I'm sure he had that thing swallowed deep, and that circle hook caught just perfectly. And see, with a barbless hook, it comes out really slick. If you can get the angle, get the angle right. Open your. These things have vice jaws. It's gonna bite my finger off. There we go. But yeah, it works pretty slick. That's why we like circle hooks, because it just goes right in the mouth. That's a nice catfish. All right, well, we'll go back to get a little bigger. Wait. So now I have 30 pound to the weight. I have 50 pound main line on a slider. So now if the weight snags, it will break off and just leave the weight. And if the hook happened to snag and I break it off, it'll break it off up here, and then my main line will slide through, so I won't be leaving a baited hook anchored to the bottom of the river. And that's the number one thing that we're trying to get folks to not do, is to be aware of that. So, and this is the way to rig up. All right, we'll throw some bait on there. Now, circle hooks are a little more difficult to get bait onto. Sometimes you gotta really dig around a little bit to. Yeah, I'm gonna do this. There we go. So it kind of depends on what you want to buy. It's a marketing deal, because so many anglers, that manufacturers have said, well, we'll offset it a bit and make it think like you can hook a fish better with it. And so, but the studies that I've seen shows that anything 10 degrees or so more offset, and they act just like a J hook. And we're just going to fling it out here. There, it settles in the bottom. And now we're only going to put 2 rods out, and there's a reason for that, because one of the number one reasons that line that you start snagging is if one of these rods hooked a fish, and this other line you got to get it out really quick. So the odds are, if you have 4 or 5 rods out, which we could put several rods out here, you could and cover a lot more water. But the odds are that you would snag one of those rods up, and then generally, instead of going out and trying to get it off, you're just going to have to break it. So it's important to try to be reasonable about how many rods that you need to put out in the hole. So we're only going to run 2 rods today. Okay, let me rig up another little sinker here, and we'll get this guy going. In my 30-pound test dropper leader, I just get a spool of 30 and just tie 2 overhand loops, and and it's just as simple as can be, and it works great. So I just double it back on itself and go through the loop like that. And then clip the tag end. Then you can just loop it around your bank sinker. It works really slick. Just loop it over, get it around, and there it's ready to go. You can just clip it on now to your main line. And it works great. I got a little different flavor. I got 3 different flavors here. I got a bass that I caught, some chunks of bass belly, and then I have a little piece of chub and this is a piece of steelhead that I caught, and I just cut some belly fillets off of it, and it works pretty slick too. And with this circle hook, all you have to do is just put the bait on, so it'll just stay on like that, and it's real simple. Oh, I missed it. The nice thing about sturgeon fishing is it's a pretty simple thing. You put a chunk of meat on the bottom of the river, and you let them do the rest. And you know, it's kind of people who catch most of the sturgeon know where sturgeon live, and just try to get it as close as you can. But generally, they have pretty good little whiskers down there. They're just real similar to a catfish in that way. And so you're just hoping to put your bait upstream of a fish that can smell it and that wants to come and eat. So sturgeon fishing is incredibly simple. There's not a lot of real high-tech stuff to it.
Okay, so tell me, how long when you throw a piece of meat out there, how long do you wait till that meat you don't think has to smell anymore? It's time to bring and put something fresh.
Well, I generally will run a piece of bait for a few hours anyway, just because I don't think you need to put that much fresh stuff out there. I will move the rod around a little bit, and we'll try a few different holes, and we'll move it around every half hour, so we'll change the bait's location. And it kind of depends on how aggressive you want to get, but there's just a lot of days out here when the fish aren't biting and you just can't force them to bite. Then there's some days when you just can't keep them off the hook, so hopefully we'll have one of those today. Let's see. And one of the things with the circle hook, we just got a little nibble on this thing. One thing you definitely want to do with the circle hook is you don't want to set the hook. You want to just let the fish basically hook themselves. And you can be really patient with a circle hook because you're not worried about them getting hooked deep. Because even if they do swallow it, the hook is not going to catch until it comes out to the corner of the mouth. And so generally I just pick the rod up and then just wait and see if it's the real deal, or maybe a catfish, or maybe a little sturgeon, or a pike minnow. Every now and then pike minnow like to peck on your lines too.
How are you going to know when to set the hook and reel it in?
Yeah, well, you don't set the hook. You just basically wait until you can really feel a mouth in it, and you'll feel that. And I'm pulling on it. You can watch the rod tip. It'll be jerk, 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 jerk like that. And once you know that fish has that thing in its mouth, you just start reeling. And don't reel really fast either. You just start reeling. Now it's bouncing now. And I wish he would just really bite and be a big fish. Looks like he probably was just a little guy that was mouthing it, so.
Hey, darling, can I tell you what's been on my mind? Sick and tired of the 9 to 5 in the city life. Hey, darling, we could get out of town, see the beautiful world around, see it now. Pack our bags and get in that car. Leave a little note and we'll drive real far. Let's get out, we can leave this city. Let's drive to the open air. Yeah, the countryside is so pretty. With the
Hoping there's going to be an eddy here. Supposedly supposed to be one.
Baby, don't you understand that we only get one life? I wanna make it count, honey. Come on now and take my hand.
But while we're here, we'll go ahead and back out a little bit just for the heck of it. Damn things. I'll try to hold it right here. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Be sure to take some of that slack up so it doesn't get to the back of the boat, but don't get it around you anywhere. All right. I remember growing up in New Mexico. My dad was born in southern Idaho and during the Great Depression, and he used to tell me stories about these great big fish that people would go down and set line out of the river and bring up with a big Ford Model T, and folks would just come up and buy a sturgeon steak. And ever since he told me about those big fish when I was very young, I've just always been fascinated. I remember reading, I believe it was a 1974 Field and Stream article about sturgeon fishing in the Snake River. I just thought that was the coolest thing. And I moved to Idaho in 1980, and that's one thing I had to do first. And I caught my first sturgeon that year in 1980, and I've been hooked ever since.
Once you caught a sturgeon, what was it that you were so impressed by that you just had to go back and do it again?
Oh, well, there's just these mysterious fish that live in the bottom of this beautiful river. They grow to be really old. They pull really hard. They have all the characteristics of a game fish that I like, where they fight hard. They'll come up and jump, and you can release them. I'm not a big. I love to catch and release fish, and so it's just right up my alley. It's just a great experience to go out and do that.
That's cool. Dinosaurs? Are they dinosaurs or are they what?
Well, they're pretty old fish. I wouldn't consider them dinosaurs, but they're, we have fossil records dating back 300 million years of sturgeon-like fish that are pretty much unchanged. So they've been around a while, pretty successful life form. And, the part of it is that these big rivers are pretty stable and they're a pretty successful organism, and they really haven't had to change. They've survived pretty well over millions of years.
What about the population of the snake? Pretty good?
Yeah, now the Hell's Canyon portion of the Snake River has probably one of the best. There's two really good functioning populations in Idaho. One of them is in the Bliss Reach, and the other one's here in Hell's Canyon. There's several other populations. They're all isolated by hydroelectric dams that are generally not considered self-sustaining, but these two populations are. We have about 105 free-flowing river miles in Hell's Canyon. And it's just top-notch sturgeon habitat, a very productive river, and a relatively stable population. So, and we see good numbers of small fish, medium-sized fish, and big fish here in this Hell's Canyon stretch. So, yeah, the population is pretty stable, and anglers are very supportive of this catch and release regulation. It certainly draws in a lot of folks, and I always say I think it's one of the most unique and probably one of the most incredible freshwater fishing experiences anybody could have.
What are your concerns for the fish in terms of human impact?
Well, the big thing that I want to try to do that I think we can do is to try to stop accumulating fishing gear in their digestive tracts. I think that's one of the biggest threats that humans pose to them now that the habitat is fragmented, and things are pretty stable now. So short of removing dams, which we're not going to do because people need the hydroelectric power, we need to start making sure that when we're out fishing for sturgeon, that we're doing everything we can to stop accumulating gear into these fish's digestive tracts.
How do they get the gear in there?
Well, generally when folks go out and they'll snag up and they'll leave a baited hook in the bottom of the river, or they'll let a fish take the bait in too deep, and they'll deep hook the fish, and they'll either break it off or they'll get it in and they can't take the hook out, and so that hook just stays in there, and it depends on where it is, but it quite often can be a fatal wound.
So they just kind of, if the stuff is on the river, then they're just sort of eating it?
Yeah, a baited hook on the bottom of the river, sturgeon are, they're eating just about anything. They're pretty omnivorous. They'll eat whatever they can, and if there's a baited hook on the bottom of the river, it's very likely that a sturgeon can find it and will consume it and eat it. So that's the idea, is to keep that gear out of the bottom of the river. Make sure you leave with as many hooks as you came with.
How does it find its food? Is it by smell or what?
Yeah, sturgeon are pretty uniquely adapted for this, river. They have their beady little eyes. They don't use a whole lot because they live in the bottom of these these deep holes, and you know, they kind of like muddy water probably better than this clearer water stuff, and they use their little barbels just like catfish, and they sniff around, and they're pretty adept at finding food. You know, their mouths are on the bottom of their heads, and so they're really suited to you know, just grabbing things off the bottom. Even though there's a lot of instances where people have witnessed sturgeon actually catching live fish, and they can do that also. But they generally like to eat things off the bottom. You know, out here, crayfish, insects, and young of the year fish larvae are probably one of the bigger components of their diet.
So what is it like to put your hand in their mouth? What does that feel like?
Well, sturgeon are pretty neat, you know, because their mouth will actually, you know, on a big fish, their mouth can extend, you know, more than 6 inches away from their body, and they're very rubbery-like. Sturgeon are they're just barely a bony fish, you know. They're just barely considered a bony fish. The majority of their hard structure in their body is cartilage, so their mouths are pretty much very rubber-like, and they're really it's a great place to grab a hold of a sturgeon. You know, when you get one in, their mouths make a really nice little handle that you can grab a hold of them, and you know, and hold their gills in the current while you revive them.
So its mouth extends out?
Yes. Yeah, the mouth extends out, and will just pick stuff off the bottom, or they'll flare their gill plates and create a suction, and then they'll suck, you know, use that suction to you know, take whatever food they're trying to catch into their mouths. I don't think you can find in freshwater the big game fishing experience the way you can with sturgeon. I mean, if a person wants to come out here and just have a brutal battle with a really large fish, there's just nothing to it. It's you have to go out marlin fishing, or you know, or bottom fishing somewhere off the ocean. Maybe go try to catch a halibut to try to have a similar fishing experience. Except you know, a lot of bottom fish don't jump, and when you get a hold of a sturgeon, it's very often that they will come out of the water. And once that happens to you it's you're pretty well hooked. It is one of the most impressive things you'll see anywhere when you're fishing in freshwater. Sturgeon fishing is, I've always kind of considered it, at one time it can be the most relaxing, and then suddenly it can turn into one of the most exciting things you can ever do, because the fishing techniques are not very complicated. You're just basically trying to find an area where you think a sturgeon is, putting some bait on the bottom of the river, and then waiting. So it's not real high-tech fishing. But once you get a hold of a fish, the whole world breaks loose on you, and it gets to be pretty exciting pretty quickly.
You go get on top of him. He's pulling the boat. Oh, there he is.
So yeah, and it can be a lot of fun real fast.
So are you sort of considered among friends and as sort of the expert steelhead, expert sturgeon fisherman?
Well, I've been doing it long enough, so I kind of know, you know, after you do things for a while, you get pretty good at it. So there's not many places in Hell's Canyon that I haven't tried to put a baited hook down to try to catch a sturgeon. So I've been pretty blessed to be able to live here in this area, to be able to get out here and fish. But it's mostly just my opportunities I've been able to take advantage of out here to learn where these fish live. Catching sturgeon is not very hard. They're not real hard to fool. You know, they're not very evolved fish, and so it's just a matter of trying to figure out where they are and where they're feeding, and then just put something down there. You know, they're usually not really picky about what they eat. They're just eating.
Settled in nice. All right.
How deep do you think it is there?
We're about 40 feet out there from us.
If he keeps that up a couple more times, I'm going to pick it up, try to hook him.
Oop, there's a good one.
Okay.
This is just a little guy. Unless it's, because with sturgeon you just never know, but usually you do. Every now and then big fish will do that. Okay, we've getting a little bite here on this little guy, and this is, hopefully we're going to get a chance to kind of show what a circle hook does. But he's been nibbling on it a little bit. Nice thing about circle hooks is that you don't need to be in an all-fire hurry to go set the hook. I just generally pick the rod up, and a lot of times I'll free spool it like this so I can let some line out if the fish wants to take it. And I'm just waiting for him to really start mouthing the bait. And we're just going to hope that he'll keep biting, but he's decided that he's just not quite totally interested yet. Little sturgeon, juvenile fish, it's pretty common for them to come up and mouth the bait like this. So a lot of times you get false alarms.
They're just curious.
They're just, yeah, whether maybe they're not big enough to actually get the bait in their mouth, or he really whacked it there good just a minute ago. It appears that he's not real interested now. So anyway, we'll have to come back when we get a better bite.
Now, how do you know he didn't eat it and he's just sitting there enjoying himself?
Well, he might be, but I doubt it. Usually you can kind of, you can pull up and feel him on there, so he's not on there. Well, it was exciting for a second. Yeah, the first time I saw a circle hook, my reaction was there's just no way that thing could ever catch a fish on any planet. And I think most people have that reaction when you look at a circle hook, because it doesn't make any sense. And so I really resisted using the circle hook for a long time until I started seeing some, literature started to build up. There's, folks doing quite a few studies on them, on lots of different fish species, from catfish to striped bass to red drum, saltwater red drum in the Gulf of Mexico. And the literature is stacking up pretty fast that the deep hooking rates with circle hooks are 10-to-1 advantage over J hooks. And my opinion, I haven't seen any sturgeon literature, but my opinion is that it's probably a lot higher than that with sturgeon. Their mouth structure is really unique, and I think circle hooks offer just a huge advantage over J hooks when you're using them. So yeah, I've completely come 180 degrees on circle hooks. I've been using them for about 3 years now, and they've just been wonderful. And I haven't had I don't lose hooks anymore. They just don't snag on the bottom near as much as a J hook does. The points don't make contact with the rocks, and so they don't get dull. Those J hooks, I was sharpening them every time you'd reel them in. You'd have to sharpen them because they were banging the tips on the rocks. That doesn't happen anymore with the circle hook. So it solves a lot of problems. I think it offers some great conservation benefits, and that's why I'm excited about sharing that message and getting folks to start using them. Hook them right, play them fast, and release them easy. Those are the three big main talking points that we're telling folks when they go sturgeon fishing. And hook them right is using a circle hook and using the correct gear. And so yeah, and that's a big part of the whole thing. Anticipating this anchor catching any second. It's just not wanting to do so. But yeah, the really neat thing about a non-offset circle hook, and it's critical for folks to use a non-offset circle hook, one that doesn't have has the point that is exactly in line with the shank. That allows a fish to actually swallow the bait, and it won't hook it. And it won't hook it until it is pulled back out, until the point changes the direction of travel, which is what happens when it hits the corner of the fish's mouth. That's why they work so well, because they'll just slide right out. If the fish can swallow it pretty deep, and nothing will happen until that thing starts coming back out its mouth. Also, one of the reasons why it's so critical to use a different technique when you're fishing is that you do not set the hook with a circle hook. You just slowly start reeling, and generally the fish will hook themselves. You'll find them all around the mouth, but it's always right in the...
It's always right on the edge.
Yeah, it's right on the edge of their mouth. So the nice thing about circle hooks is that they hook on the edge of the mouth almost every single time. Very, very rarely will you ever have one that hooks deep. When you get the fish up, hold them by the mouth, upside down in the water, and they generally will let you revive them until their gills start pumping, and then they can, then you can release them as soon as they're ready to go. And he'll let you know when he's ready to go.
Woohoo!
Quick.
Get that anchor ready because he's heading like a freight train downriver. It's really exciting.
Okay, now Eric, you need to come here and grab this pole really quickly. Hold on to it just like that. Ready? And let some more, just a little bit of line out. Woo, that was close. Good job. That was a good save. That's close as I've come to being spooled in a long time. Yeah, he's a big fish, but I can move. There he is. I can move him. Oh yeah, it's a nice 8-footer. Woohoo! Look how hot that drag is. I think he's ready. Slowly bouncing. Not sitting still now.
That's why sturgeon fishing is so nice, because you can sit all day long and not catch anything. And you finally get that one fish. It gets all worth it.
So he took your whole spool?
Yeah. About 200 yards of line he took and just, well, you saw how quickly it was. he was headed for Lewiston.
I was exhausted. It was touch and go there for a little bit, whether or not we were going to run out of line. I mean, I jammed that thing in reverse and blasted out in the middle of the river, and that fish was still going, still taking line. I was going full speed backwards, and that fish was still taking line. There was 20 wraps left on that spool. And that second fish, was a half hour later, did the exact same thing. Except we were ready for it this time.
Beautiful fish. Now that is a world-class fishing experience.
It's critical now as more and more folks take up sturgeon fishing. You know, I had this wonderful sport all to myself. More and more folks are discovering how awesome sturgeon fishing is, and that's not the case anymore. And so that's why it's more critical for every time a new sturgeon fisherman comes out, it's more critical for all of us to really watch what we're doing and make sure that we're practicing low impact fishing. Okay, well for me the philosophy is to get out there and hook them right, play them fast, and release them easy. Spink.